Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Giant Retcon, I presume. Sorry, I mean Dr. Bashir, I presume. This video is part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek one episode at a time. In this video I cover episode 16 of season 5 of Star Trek DS9, Dr. Bashir, I presume. So Dr. Bashir, I presume, is the episode in which Dr. Zimmerman shows up on the station wanting to create a long-term hologram, an LMH, and he wants to base it off of Dr. Bashir and his personality. And so he wants to set up interviews with people that know and love Dr. Bashir to get a better sense of him. And Bashir asks politely if he could not interview his parents. And since Louis Zimmerman is an ass, he specifically goes out of his way to interview his parents, and then we soon learn that Bashir and his parents are hiding a deep, dark secret, which his parents idiotically give away to the hologram thinking that it's Bashir, and they reveal that Bashir was genetically engineered as a child, which is illegal in the Federation. And so Bashir risks his career being destroyed, and he doesn't want to fight it. He just wants to resign and have his career be destroyed. However, his father makes a deal with Starfleet Academy that he'll go to prison for 2 years and Bashir will remain in Starfleet, and it is now revealed to the world that he is genetically enhanced. There's also a B plot where Zimmerman is flirting with Leeta and trying to get her to leave with him to Jupiter Station and offers her a job as a cafe manager. However, she clearly has a thing for Rom, but Rom won't admit it. But finally, Rom gets up the courage and tells her not to leave, that they're in love with each other, and she admits she's in love with him too. And they go off happily ever after, where Zimmerman just starts flirting with another random chick. So, this is the infamous episode. It is the #1 worst retcon in all of Star Trek, in my humble opinion. I did a top 10 worst retcon videos before, and this was my #1. And just in case you don't know what I mean by retcon, it stands for retroactive continuity. It is when you disregard established continuity and say, oh no, this is actually different. Even if you say, oh no, this is different all along, you just didn't know about it. But clearly the writing staff and everyone did not intend this to be the case earlier on, and they just retroactively just recently decided, oh, let's just say he's been genetically engineered the whole time. And this is the clear worst example to that. Now, I think I need to talk about Ronald D. Moore. I mentioned him as one of my favorite writers in Star Trek. I think he was a great addition. I think he really enhanced Deep Space Nine. He enhanced TNG. He went on, of course, to become the showrunner of Battlestar Galactica. He is, and I really want him to return to modern Trek. Like, I really want him to return to modern Trek. Like, I think he's an amazing writer. Really helped shape Star Trek. But it's not to say he is flawless. He does have some flaws. For one, him and Ira Stephen Bear don't really get Roddenberry's vision of a utopian future, and will often undermine it, which is, that's fine. But I think the bigger flaw specific to Ronald D. Moore is that he likes to retcon things willy-nilly and doesn't really. And to be fair, it's not like he does it all the time, but there's just a couple of instances where it really stings out. And TNG, I talked about this already. It was with Wesley Crusher. In the episode First Duty, he thought that Wesley didn't want to be in Starfleet anymore, so that they should that he should lose his commission and be kicked out of Starfleet Academy. Michael Piller, in his great wisdom, said no, that's not true to his character. He actually should be in Starfleet, so he wouldn't let Ronald D. Moore do that. But later in Season 7, when Michael Piller was busy doing billions of other things, getting ready for Voyager, getting ready for Star Trek Generations, and working as the showrunner of Star Trek Deep Space Nine, that's when he wasn't there to keep an eye on Ronald D. Moore, didn't care enough, was too busy to care, and let him get away with completely retconning Wesley's character to now make him act like a angsty emo teenager who wants to quit Starfleet Academy to become some magical traveler, which 1000% is a giant retcon. I think it was also my top 10 worst retcons list. And then the episode Favorite Son, which I'm going to review very shortly, so it came out right along the same time, which is a Voyager episode, so Ronald D. Moore wasn't involved in it. But there is a quote of him saying that he felt like they should have made Harry Kim actually being from the Delta Quadrant a real thing and not reveal it to be a fraud. They thought that they should have made Harry Kim be actually an alien from the Delta Quadrant, which would be a fucking ridiculous retcon, but that's what Ronald D. Moore thought they should have done. And also, speaking of that, in earlier DS9 Season 3, an episode where they're trying to reveal Kira to be a Cardassian spy, he wanted to make it actually be a Cardassian, that Kira was actually a Cardassian this whole time, which again would be a very terrible, ridiculous retcon. So sometimes they don't let them get away with it, but sometimes, like Wesley, they did, and now this. Now, and this retcon, this tendency to retcon things is also shown in Battlestar Galactica. Not giving away spoilers, but towards the end of the season, they reveal certain characters to actually be Cylons, towards the end of the show, I mean. And it was very obviously a retcon. It's extremely obvious that they had no indication and no intention of ever showing them to be Cylons, but then they're like, oh, and it really doesn't fit. So that is, if I was going to point, as much as I admire Ronald D. Moore, as much as I feel like he enhanced the Star Trek universe, that is a major flaw in his character, in his writing style. I should say, not character, I don't know him personally, but his writing, that's a major flaw in his writing style, in my opinion. But it's not enough to make him a bad writer. I still think he's a great writer. But every once in a while, he'll do this retconning shit. And, before I was saying, I'm just I'm presuming that it was Ronald D. Moore. And I said this in the past. Well, I don't know if it was his idea. Well, guess what? I was just reading Memory Alpha, and guess what it said? It was Ronald D. Moore's idea to create this. Now, to be fair, they said that, and it was brought out by this episode. It was created specifically in order to make this episode interesting, which is what pisses me off. Like, in order to make an episode you're working on, which, by the way, was originally conceived as a dumb comedy episode, in order to make it really interesting, you want to retroactively retcon a major cast member and make this major change, which will drastically change his character going forward, and also recontextualize everything that comes before it in the way that it clearly wasn't intentional. And you do it just to better this dumb comedy episode? That's really reckless, in my opinion. It's really bad writing, in my opinion. So apparently, the thing I read was that it was a quote from Renee Echevarria, who was working on this episode with Ronald D. Moore, and they were trying to figure out how to make this episode more interesting. Just some backstory to digress a little bit. The pitch for this was a not freelance, but when you call it submissions from non-writers. This was a pitch, and the original pitch was that this would be the EMH or Dr. Zimmerman coming on board and creating this LMH with Bashir. That was meant to be a B plot, a funny little B plot. But apparently the writing staff didn't like the A plot that was pitched, but they liked the B plot, so they bought it and turned it into an A plot. They thought, oh, we can make this into an A plot. Which I disagree with. I think this should have been a B plot. Like, if they need to do it at all, it should have been a B plot. I mean, I like meeting Bashir's parents, and I like aspects of this episode that don't deal with genetically engineering, but I'll get to that shortly. So, because the genetically engineering was not a part of the original pitch. The original pitch was just about, Dr. Zimmerman making Bashir into an LMH. So, but Ron D. Moore was trying to work on it. It's because they made this stupid decision to make it the A plot. So we're trying to work on a way to make it more interesting. And Ron D. Moore came up with the idea of having Bashir have a deep, dark past, a secret with his parents that he's desperately trying to hide. But Ron D. Moore had no idea what that could be. And apparently, maybe I should put some of the blame on Rene Echevarria, to be fair, because apparently he's the one who was talking to Ronald D. Moore about genetic engineering and how it's weird that this is something that Star Trek never really touches on, where most sci-fi shows would touch on it. And yeah, they hadn't, just Khan, but that was like, years ago with the original series. Like, since then, they haven't really touched on it. And that's when Ronald D. Moore came up with the idea, what if we make Bashir genetically engineered? And apparently, Rene Echevarria agreed with this. So again, he deserves some of the blame. But Ronald D. Moore is the one who has more of the pattern of doing retcons. But anyway, so they decided, wouldn't it make sense if we made Bashir genetic? That would be a deep, dark secret in that. So they did it for this episode, not realizing that would totally change his character. So Ira Steven Behr was quoted as saying that he was never really happy with the decision to make Bashir genetically engineered. He thought it kind of altered the character in a way that didn't necessarily work for him. And apparently Ira Steven Behr was cited as creating episodes like statistical probabilities, which introduced like the other genetically engineered things to try to smooth it over and make it more sense. That was his attempt, because they were stuck with the retcon now. That was his attempt to sort of smooth it over and make it fit more, but he apparently still was never really happy with it, which is the correct response. He never should have let Ronald D. Moore get away with it in the first place, but that's just me. Ronald D. Moore, on the other hand, was very happy with it. He thought that it really made Bashir a more interesting character, and he thought it fit perfectly into this background. Like, there's so many weird quirks about Bashir. Now, this gets back to, again, I love Ronald D. Moore, one of the best writers in Star Trek, but this gets back to how he can wildly misinterpret a character, the same way he did with Wesley Crusher, where he thought, Wesley Crusher wouldn't want to follow in his father's footsteps, he wouldn't want to get a Starfleet, where nothing in the show indicated that. In fact, everything in the show indicated the opposite, that he really wanted to be in Starfleet, so I don't know where the fuck he was getting this from. And the same thing with Bashir. Nothing in his background indicates that he's genetically engineered. Ronald D. Moore brought up things like, he was, the fact that he didn't become the real valedictorian and messed up on a simple question, or the fact that he wanted to be a tennis player. And to me, those are evidence that proves that he's not genetically engineered. Like, the catch-all excuse that they use in this episode and going forward is that, it's because he was pretending to be genetically engineered. Like, he purposely missed that question. So recontextualize. So if you don't know what I'm saying, I can't remember the episode. I think it this was first brought up. I can't remember which episode it was. Maybe it was Q-less, but there was an episode that brought up that Bashir, during his final exams or whatever at Starfleet Medical, he missed like a question that later Robert Hewitt Wolf's wife, who knows something about the medical profession, would point out was a very dumb mistake, and that any idiot would, well, not any idiot, but anyone studying medicine would clearly know, and there's no way someone who's as smart as Dr. Bashir could make this mistake. And at first I don't think they realized that how idiotic of a mistake it was when they originally wrote it. But then they explored it even more when, I think it was the episode Explorers. No, maybe, yeah, I think it was Explorers, one of those season 3 B plots, where the Bashir's former classmate, who actually did beat him out for valedictorian just because he missed that one question, came to the station. He was being all nervous and wouldn't really want to talk to her or whatever, and it was revealed that it was better off that he missed that question. And so I guess Ronald D. Moore is saying, well, it doesn't make sense that he would miss such an easy question, so the fact that he did it on purpose because he was trying to hide his genetic engineering, that makes sense. I disagree. I think, and not only do I disagree, I think it's less interesting that way. I think it's more interesting to think of that he's a flawed character, that he made a mistake, that he's a human being and he's not perfect and he just fucked up. And I think that makes him a much more interesting, much more flawed character. But Ronald D. Moore, on the other hand, think it would be more interesting if he is in fact perfect and he was just pretending not to be, which I could not disagree more. And overall, I mean, that's just one of many examples. I could go through many examples of like him playing racquetball with O'Brien or darts with O'Brien, or oh god, there were other specific examples I was going throughout earlier episodes of DS9 where I was like pointing to him being like, there's no way he's genetically engineered. Like, this proves that he's not genetically engineered, that he would never make such an easy mistake if he was. And I know that, again, the catch-all excuse, oh, he was pretending not to be, in many cases, as bullshit. Like, that's very clearly not the case. So I think it doesn't at all fit, which is why I think it's the worst retcon in Star Trek history. And I think it kind of ruins his character going forward. Like, as I said, like, Ira Steven Behr tries to work with it and compensate for it. But, and to be fair, it doesn't, like, completely ruin his character. Like, he's not a terrible character going forward. He's still an interesting character. But that aspect of his character is really dumb. And I wish it wasn't there. And I think he's a more interesting character without it. That he's having him be a flawed, arrogant guy and not be some sci-fi explanation, I think is way more interesting. And I said before that I felt like, and don't know if I have any evidence for this, but I feel like the decision to make him genetically engineered was just the writers being lazy and saying, oh, you know, that they didn't really know how to write for Bashir or how to make him interesting. And it's like, oh, I don't really know how to make Bashir that interesting. Oh, let's just do this quick fix and make him some sci-fi bullshit genetically engineered, and that makes him more interesting. That's a cheat in my regard. That is not good writing. That it would be good writing if you actually made him a real human being and tried to work with his character by making him flawed and complex. That would be hard. That would be good writing. This is lazy writing, in my humble opinion. And also, as I said, it's just sacrificing an entire character arc for the sake of one shitty episode. Now, all that being said, if you take away the terrible retcon, this is actually a decent episode. I actually don't mind this episode if it wasn't for the retcon. I do think it's interesting having him have a turbulent relationship with his parents. I think it shouldn't have been over genetic engineering, but I still think it is interesting. And plus, as they pointed out, it was hinted at in earlier episodes, particularly Homefront, when Odo was going to visit Earth and asked Bashir if there's anyone he wanted to look up, and Bashir is like, no, not really, I don't really have anyone. So that does beg the question. And there was like other episodes too where his parents were casually mentioned. He kind of pushed it off. So I feel like the idea that he had a bad relationship with his parents was something that something that they did in fact think of, and that they were hinting at in earlier episodes. And so now they finally decided to explore that, which is all well and good. But to make it be about genetically engineering was a bad decision. Also, I don't know how much I agree with them making Julian Bashir's father out to be such a loser. He's like going from job to job and not being able to hold a job. I think that's that's looking at it from a modern perspective, which I think Deep Space Nine people like Ronald D. Moore and Ira Steven Bear do too much. Because if you look at it from the 24th century post-scarcity society perspective, I mean, I'm not saying it couldn't happen in that society, but it would be contextualized differently. I don't think he would outright be a loser, because there wouldn't be the financial pressure of needing to provide for a family and being unwilling to do so. And plus, I think that involves like some, stereotypical cliche reading of masculinity and how the men always have to provide. That's kind of tied into that as well, which again would not exist in this 24th century setting. And so you could look at it, he could be terrible at the stuff he does and not finding what he wants to do in life, but I feel like it would be contextualized different. Instead of it be portrayed as him being a loser, scumbag, and always a failure, it would be more portrayed in more of an understanding light of being more sympathetic to, you can't find your place in the world and you need to discover what's right for you, and people would be encouraging him to try different things. Because not having that financial pressure to provide for your family, he'd be free to explore different things. And if he's not very good at one thing, and maybe they could nudge him, be like, maybe you should try something else, like maybe take a course and study, or maybe commit. Maybe you're not committing to a particular life form, but or a lifestyle, but saying like, if you don't, maybe you really don't want to do this, and maybe you should find something you do really want to do. So it would be completely different contextualized. And again, this is me being a nerdy and believing in Roddenberry's vision for the post-scarcity utopia, which I do believe in. Clearly, Ira Steven Bear and Ronald D. Moore didn't. In fact, Memory Alpha even mentions that this is another example showing how they tried to show cracks in Roddenberry's vision, which their cracks don't work. They only work in a modern context. If you put them in this context, it doesn't make sense why people would see him as a loser, which Julian clearly does. That's the point they're trying to make, that he genetically engineered Julian because that was the only way to leave his legacy, a mark on his thing, because he sucked at everything else. But I don't think that fits in this post-scarcity society situation. Now, the other interesting thing about genetic engineering is the looking at it in retrospect after Strange New Worlds. So this is actually the first episode where they mention that genetic engineering is a big-ass no-no, and that the Federation is very much against it, and it's very illegal. And I suppose that came out of Renee Echevarria and Ronald D. Moore's conversation of why there haven't been any genetic engineered individuals in Star Trek, and because since Khan, and so they came up with the idea that because of Khan, it's been outlawed. In fact, they even bring up Khan in this episode. So I think that's something they intentionally did to explain why we never see any genetic engineered individuals. Although there was that episode Masterpiece Society, which Memory Alpha brings up. But in Masterpiece Society, they had like broken off from Earth before Starfleet or the Federation, before the Federation was formed. I don't know about Starfleet, but it was before the Federation was formed. So you could excuse it that way. However, Picard's interaction with them should have been totally different, because he was like respecting their genetically engineering, but he should have been totally against it. But as I mentioned in my review for that very boring episode, that was written before they decided to make it be Starfleet or Federation's thing to be absolutely against genetic engineering. But so this is the first episode, in fact, where they brought that up. And this is something that Strange New Worlds runs with and makes a recurring storyline about. And it's interesting because apparently O'Brien has a line in this episode, is that there hasn't been a Starfleet officer having to deal with the issue of being genetically engineered for within 100 years. And so Memory Alpha points out that would make sense. That would track with Strange New Worlds, that was the last time, because we see on screens Starfleet officer being genetically engineered, and the controversy on that. It is kind of disappointing, though, in the context of Strange New Worlds, because Strange New Worlds takes a totally different perspective, which I like. They make it seem the Federation's hatred or repulsion at genetic engineering, they make it seem like a prejudice, like a bias, like a flaw in the Federation, which definitely was not how Ronald D. Moore intended it here. But it's an interesting angle, and I actually like it. I think it makes a lot of sense. But the issue I have is that it's showing like Una trying to make strives to overcome this prejudice, but we know from this episode, which takes place 100 years later, that they hadn't made those strides. That Starfleet and the Federation is just as prejudiced as it was 100 years ago, which is kind of disappointing. But that is, that's the dangers of doing a prequel. But anyway, let me talk about Robert Picardo. I haven't mentioned Robert Picardo and his portrayal of Louis Zimmerman. Louis Zimmerman had played Louis Zimmerman twice before, but those are both holographic representations. There was the episode Projections. I don't know if that counts, but there was definitely the Swarm, which wasn't really Louis Zimmerman. It was just a engineering program. So I don't know if that actually counts. So I don't think he actually did portray Louis Zimmerman before. I think this is definitely the first time we see the actual Louis Zimmerman. And of course he portrays him as an ass. He plays him basically the exact same way he plays the Doctor. Maybe there's a slight difference. I think he's more of an ass in this episode than the Doctor is, to be fair. So they're saying that Louis Zimmerman is a flat-out asshole. And we do see Louis Zimmerman again in the Voyager episode Lifeline, but for some reason he seemed to have aged 30 or 40 years within the 2 years. This is something I want to rant and rave about when we get to Lifeline. But why the fuck did they portray him as an old man all of a sudden when we've seen him in this episode already and he is the same age that the Doctor appears to be? Like, I don't like that episode. Some fans seem to like it, but probably just because Barclay and Troy are in it. But I'll get to that bullshit when I get to it. Fan service. Throw fan service at you. Remember these guys from TNG? Sorry, no. That's something I'll get to later. Yeah. So anyway, that's not a problem with this episode. It's a problem with that episode. But I can't watch this episode without thinking about how the fuck did he age 40 years within 2 years? But anyway, I think I like his performance here. I think it's a nice little novelty. It is, yeah. I got to rewire my brain a bit to allow to see the Doctor on DS9, and it's interesting that they integrate that whole EMH program thing. So I did notice a nitpick, and on this episode, maybe some people could, headcanon it away, but at one scene in the episode where Louis Zimmerman's talking about how great the EMH program was, and he's like, I'm surprised you don't have one on D-Space 9, and Sisko's like, unfortunately the Cardassian technology is incompatible with, doing the Federation Starfleet technology to do the EMH. Yet, later in that very same episode, we see the EMH of the new one they're building, the LMH they're building with Bashir, and we also see the original EMH pop up in the infirmary on D-Space 9. Well, I thought that it was incompatible with technology. And if your excuse is to say, well, maybe they came in and fixed the problem, then if they're just fixing the problem now, why the fuck couldn't they have done it before? Like, why does Sisko even throw that out as an excuse if all you have to do is get some engineering and rewire it and fix it? Which, by the way, actually makes sense to me that they would have been able to rewire and fix it. It seems to me that Sisko just had that line for a bullshit excuse of why D-Space 9 doesn't have an EMH. That's just me. I mean, I think it would have been better for them to just say, oh, we do have an EMH, we just never needed to use it. Just do that. And I get why there wouldn't be an EMH on Defiant, because that's a warship and their sickbay sucks. It's tiny. It's this tiny little ship. So that I get. Although you feel like if you're in a warship, you might have more need for emergency medical aid. I'm just saying. Because you're more likely to get, have people get hurt. But anyway, sorry. That's off topic. Yeah, I don't know. I think I like Robert Picardo and I like his performance here, but I think that they do portray him a little bit too much as an ass. Like they ramp up that ass. Like that, for example, the moment where Bashir's like, consider it a favor if you didn't contact my parents, and he leaves and he's like, note to self, contact parents immediately. Like, that's too much. And not only is it too much, it's predictable. It's obvious. You knew that's what he was going to do as soon as Bashir walked out of the room. It was predictable and dumb. And the whole thing with him having a crush on Leeta and then it being just fleeting, like that was kind of dumb too. But yeah, I mean, but if you take out the whole genetic engineering bullshit and just be about his Bashir's estranged relationship with his parents and how that's being tested and how what Zimmerman does kind of fuck it up and it ruins his opportunity to have this LMH or whatever, I like that storyline. And I like seeing Louis Zimmerman on board. I think it was a good use of him and the concept of there being a new hologram based off Bashir. That was fun. Like, it's good. So I would really like this story if it was not for it having the worst retcon in Star Trek history being involved in it. So now let's get to the B plot. It's silly, but it's fine. Like, it's meant to be silly. I don't really have much to say about it because it's fine. It's dumb, but in a good way, and not a good way, but in an acceptable way, in a normal way. Like, it's a fun little B plot about Rom being too nervous. Like, I will say, I did find a scene funny when Rom is talking to Quark about how he's gonna go up, and today's the day he's gonna go up and tell Leeta how she feels, and she comes over like being really sort of definitely enthusiastic on him and really giving strong vibes that she's into him. And he goes up to her and he says, Leeta. Oh no, he doesn't even say anything. He just looks at her, holds his tongue, and she's like waiting for him to talk, and then he just says, bye, and walks out. Like, I thought that was a funny scene. To be fair, I thought that was good humor. And then later, when she's trying to talk to him about, he comes up and interrupts her with Zimmerman and just goes, "I have something important to tell you." And then Paul hesitates and like, I need to fix your replicator or something bullshit like that, and it's sort of showing him sort of wimp out. But the other thing is when she's talking to him, weighing the pros and cons about going to Jupiter Station with Zimmerman, and Rom is just like, I don't know. I don't know. He says that for everything, and eventually, when Leeta asks and he starts going, she's like, you don't know. I can certainly relate to being nervous about approaching a woman about it, that you have feelings for her, but that you do have feelings for her. But then again, like, and I had been obtuse to other people's attraction to me before, but still, I think it's a bit ridiculous of how obtuse Rom is. Like, very clearly she's attracted to him. Very clearly she's trying to push him to say that. But here's another thing I will throw out. There's nothing stopping Leeta from telling Rom how she feels about him. Just throwing that out there. Like, Rom does not need to be the one that initiates that. Like, I kind of hate that. That's like a societal norm that the man is always expected to be the one to proposition the woman, which isn't always the case. Women can proposition men. It's happened before, and so I think it's ridiculous to assume it's his obligation. If she really feels that strongly about him, why the fuck doesn't she say anything about it? And of course I know the answer. The answer is so the episode can happen. Obviously. But it was cute. I thought it was cute when it was obvious that Leeta didn't really want to go to that with Louis Zimmerman, but it was a huge career opportunity for her. But she wasn't really into it, and because it's obvious that Zimmerman's feelings for her are superficial, which they make clear by the fact that he just hits on some other random hot chick as soon as she leaves. So it was cute that Rom came, and it was like very romantic comedy-esque of Rom coming at the last second saying, "Wait, I love you," and I don't know if I buy Leeta would have a thing for Rom, but I don't know. Each turn. It's not out of the realm of possibility. But apparently, I was reading a behind-the-scenes thing, and apparently there was a blooper or a mistake or whatever where Robert Picardo is playing Zimmerman talking to the new hot chick, and apparently he says something, "Oh, did you know this?" He said something about the Kama Sutra, like in the actual take. But there's an outtake where he says, "Oh, are you familiar with my work on Star Trek Voyager?" Which I think is kind of funny. I'm recording this before the Delta Flyers gets to this episode. I'm really interested to see what they do when they do get to this episode. I wonder, they seem to like having Chase Masterson on, so I wonder if they're going to have her on. I hope that they have Robert Picardo on, because, Robert Duncan McNeil and Garrett Wong are friends with Robert Picardo, so hopefully they bring him on. That would be interesting to see. But we'll see. We'll see what that happens. I wanted them to have Alexander Siddig on for the quickening, and they didn't, which I'm still disappointed about. But so I wouldn't hold my breath, wouldn't guarantee it, but it would be interesting. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, I would now like to thank my Patreon supporters very much for supporting me on Patreon. It's very much appreciated. It does help me continue with the channel. I want to give a big shout out, special thanks to Brandon Neilhouse and Jordan Johnson. Thank you both so very, very much for your strong support. I'd also like to give a shout out to Tyler Cease, Benjamin Mead, Antarius, Francisco, Chuck Hooks, Kyrie091, Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Alessandro Miguel, Sarah, Norman Buchwald, Stephen Kennedy, Brenton Berg, and Allison Fordyce. Thank you all so very, very much for your support. So, we have a couple Facebook comments. If you want to leave comments, I'll read my videos. You don't need to be a Patreon supporter. You can leave the shorter comments if you go to my Facebook page or my Blue Sky page. I have links to both in the description below. I actually have 3 Facebook comments, which is a lot more than I usually have. So, maybe this is starting to take off. First comment says, I have the honor of watching this episode way before I saw any Voyager episodes, so I never even knew it was a crossover for years. And truthfully, I never felt that the Doctor was shoehorned into this. I felt like a very natural Bashir story about genetic engineering. Well, don't get me started on genetic engineering. However, it's interesting to hear your perspective. The perspective of someone who hadn't seen Voyager and didn't even realize this was a crossover and how it wasn't like obvious, because there's certain things like you watch, you can tell even if you don't know intellectually, you can tell, oh, they're definitely doing this a crossover. I always think about when I saw the movie Serenity, I had no idea it was based off a TV show called Firefly or based off of anything. However, just by watching the movie, which I did like, by the way, but by watching the movie, I could tell it was based on something. I could tell there was like things I was missing, and that they were expecting people to be familiar with these characters. I think I originally thought it was based off a book, but then I found out it was based off a TV show. I was like, okay, that actually makes a lot of sense. But anyway, so this episode wasn't like that. I could see that. That would be my guess, that it's not too invasive of a character, that he could just be a random character and doesn't have to be a cameo from another show. Anyway, next comment is from Anthony Harris, who says, Dr. Bashir once farted on the duck. When I asked why he said it, he said it had it coming, and then refused to continue the conversation. If anyone else knows what the hell that means, let me know. I have no idea what that means, but thanks for your comment. Next comment is from Robert Guffrey, who says, Bashir was the hottest Doctor in Star Trek. I'm going to have to concur. I think maybe Dr. Crusher is the one who was closest. But yeah, Bashir is hotter than her, I'm going to have to say. Yeah, because the other ones is the Doctor, Dr. Phlox, Bashir. No thank you to... Not Bashir, sorry. McCoy. Leonard McCoy. McCoy, Phlox, the Doctor. Yeah, none of them really add up. I guess if you include Modern Trek, you got Dr. Culber, who maybe could be hotter than Bashir. Not hotter than Bashir. Maybe close to it, though. And same with Dr. Mbaga from Strange New Worlds. Close to being as hot as Bashir, but not quite. I think Bashir still is hotter. Who else? What was that? Did they have a... No, they didn't really have a Doctor on Picard. It had those holograms of Rio, but I'm not going to count that. That was stupid. God, what other Modern Trek? Yeah. Oh, Dr. Ta'ana from Lower Decks. No, she's the hottest. Sorry. The cat lady, she's much hotter than Bashir. Just kidding. Anyway. It's totally off topic, but it reminds me of a conversation I had where they were making, like, with my friends, and they were making fun of this guy because he thought that Judy Hopps, or whatever her name is from the Zootopia movie, he thought that she was a little hot, and they were like, oh, that's stupid, and making fun of him for that. And I was like, I think she is kind of hot. And they're like, all right, and then they started making fun of me, but whatever. I'm not ashamed to say it. Anyway, so let's get to our Patreon comments then. So first comment is from Antarius, who says, I went into this episode with the intention of giving it a 1 or 2 out of 10, and There's nothing there to convince me otherwise. Has Dr. Zimmerman ever heard about subspace communication? Any normal person would have spoken about the proposal via subspace before making a maybe futile trip to the station. The whole idea of basing the hologram on the looks of an actual person is stupid. Who would like to have a hologram clones of oneself? Why not choose a random appearance? The love triangle between Rom, Leeta, and Zimmerman was totally unbelievable and terrible. Why can't Leeta confess her love first? That the male has to show the initiative feels so dated. And of course, the most terrible aspect of the retcon of making Bashir genetically enhanced. I have heard the opinion that this fits quite well with the way he has been portrayed so far. I totally disagree with this view. So my rating is a 1 out of 10. Wow. Wow. For people thinking I'm being harsh in this episode. This is much more harsh. But I do agree with you on several levels. Of course I agree with you about the Bashir genetically enhanced. Totally does not match with how he's portrayed. Anyone who views otherwise is just flat out wrong. Where else? There's something else you said that I believed, that I agreed with. Oh, yeah, Leeta. Well, why doesn't she confess her love first? 100% agree with that. However, otherwise, I think you're being too harsh. Well, at least harsher on the episode than I would. Because I actually kind of like it. And as far as Dr. Zimmerman showing up instead of communicating through subspace, I think that fits with his arrogant personality. That he just assumes that people would agree to his proposal, that he would have the gusto and the arrogance to just show up and say, oh, yeah, well, I'm definitely going to approve, so I might as well be here. I think that fits his character personally. But yeah, other than that, yeah, totally agree about the retcon. Anyway, next comment is from Tyler Cease, who says, I saw this episode in October of 2023. I like this episode. Here's an interesting fact. The Doctor was created by Dr. Zimmerman. You frequently talked about how the Doctor and 709 should have been in a relationship. Zimmerman is Jerry Ryan's maiden name, although it was spelled differently. Interesting fun fact. Anyway, next comment is from Kyrie091, who says, Dr. Bashir, I presume. More like Antarius was here, I assume. 'Cause he beat me again. Antarius, you're basically the Sloan to my Bashir. You're the Claw to my Kirk. You're the Kai Wen to my Kaiopaka. Or wait, maybe you're Kaiopaka because you were here first. I don't know. I forgot what I was talking about. Anyway, this episode is interesting. I think they sort of jumped the shark trying to make Bashir more interesting. It sort of works sometimes, but usually it doesn't add much. How do you square this with Season 1 Dopey Bashir? Anyway, Tyler Cease beat me also. That makes him the crew to my Merrick Buttrick. And Antarius has a response to this comment saying, just accept it, the days of your reign are over. I think it's funny that there's now a feud about who gets the comment or what the patron comments first. I know it's all just fun, all in good fun feud, but it's hilarious. Anyway, next comment is from Norman Buchwald, who says, so out of all the Star Trek retcons, what was the reason / the purpose for this one again? While this episode is at least not twisting the knife of WTF retcons like Dark Frontier, this is a question that lingers for the rest of the series. I mean, what role / theme did augments have in Deep Space Nine series out of late season 5? The Jem'Hadar has a point of comparison. The cloning of the Vorta was not established as of yet. That was later in this season. Still, what the changelings were imposing / manipulating races of all solids in general is a hard stretch to compare them with, say, the hardly ever mentioned Khan in DS9 to add to Bashir's character. If anything, the retcon made certain earlier episodes seem peculiar. Just because Siddig is a fine actor and the writers going forward did some things to address past issues, but sometimes hard to buy, such as in this individual episode, deliberately cheating to lose with O'Brien at darts, etc. I mean, come on. At least other retcons somehow contribute to stories and characters, where this one is, why is this even here / needed? And what did we get with this reveal? I think Inquisition and Bashir's dealings with Sloane could still happen without Bashir hiding his genetic enhancements. So what's left is our statistical probability gang, who for some reason are assigned to sleep in the cargo bay than have any proper quarters. Yeah, that's a complaint for that episode. And guess what? Very overrated with an out-of-nowhere homage to The Sound of Music. And no, the Voyager crossover where we get to know more about Zimmerman did not help this episode either. 2 sitcom laugh tracks behind Bashir's parents revealing he's an augment in front of an unknown Bashir hologram out of 10. Oh yes, you remind me of something I forgot to mention, which was the whole sitcom scene where Bashir's parents went up to the hologram and just started blurting out and talking before you had. It was the old sitcom cliche of him before you let any word out to be like, no, don't talk, let me talk. We just want to apologize and we just want to give away our secrets before before making sure that it's safe to talk here in this very public place. That was so dumb. So dumb. I will agree with you 100% on that. And yeah, the whole thing with him cheating on darts with O'Brien for all these years, this, clearly he wasn't. Clearly, you go back and watch in these episodes, he absolutely 100% wasn't. Here's the thing, and Alexander Siddig was actually really pissed off with the fact that they didn't tell him about this genetically engineered thing until several days before they meant to film this episode. He actually liked the fact that he was genetically engineered. He thought that was good storytelling, so I disagree with him there. But he was just pissed off about the fact that he was told so late. And here's the thing, I might have appreciated this more if this had been planned from the beginning. If they had told Alexander Siddig to play it that way. Maybe don't even need to do it from season 1, maybe season 3. Maybe they did it for 2 years and then they finally reveal it. That would still also be acceptable. But the fact that, and that way he would play it, they could throw in these little hints, but instead it's retroactive continuity at its finest, or at its worst, depending on how you would say it, because they're trying to shove the new revelation and say, oh no, this recontextualizes it. No, it doesn't fit. Doesn't fit. Anyway, sorry. Next comment is from Stephen Kennedy, who says, by Inferno's light, aka source of flight, continue. The runabout still being in orbit. Number 1, it must have been out of petrol. Number 2, how did the aliens know it was still in orbit? Number 3, they saw the runabout on Google Maps live, or a Jemadar soldier told them. 4, the escape. It's 12:40 p.m. 5 robbers enter a bank. 10 minutes later, they are surrounded by the police. At 1 p.m., the police commissioner said to everyone it is lunchtime, hence how the 5 bank robbers got away. I didn't mind really about Garrick's daddy, but there was no point to it as nothing ever came about it. I'm glad General Martok is back on the show. Julian Bashir turned on his computer so they could check Google Maps live. Now, let's talk about Hercules Worf. On TNG, Hercules Worf was established to be terrible as a Klingon warrior, as a fighter, and a hopelessly security officer, and lost to a barrel. At least Deep Space Nine made him capable warrior, but this episode made him a god. The Shadow from Enterprise appears as the Jem'Hadar first. The Shadow from Enterprise? Oh, is that the same actor who does the Mystery Man from Enterprise? Oh, that would be news to me. I will be back next week to continue with Donald Duca. So my rating for Computer Bashir, I presume, is 3 updates on Windows 11 for Bashir out of 10. Well, you didn't talk about Dr. Bashir, I presume, but at least you gave a rating for it instead of Computer Bashir, I presume. Yeah, so it's all about By Inferno's Light, which I suppose you didn't talk about it in that review because you didn't have enough room to talk about both parts, so you saved the second part for this review. So, okay, that's fine. I agree with all your criticism, of course, about the runabout being left in orbit. 100% agree that it doesn't make any sense. It's really stupid. Also agree that the thing with Worf being... I don't know if I agree, though. The thing with Worf fighting to the death was kind of a boring storyline. They couldn't care less about it. But as far as him being like completely incompetent in TNG, the thing is that their intention was always to make Worf a great fighter. Like, you also have episodes like Reunion where he kicked Doris's ass. And they always portrayed him as a good fighter and said he was a good fighter. But the problem is, whenever they had a big alien bad guy, in order to prove how big and bad this alien bad guy was, they would have him kick Worf's ass. Because they're like, well, if they can kick Worf's ass, then they can kick anyone's ass. So he must be a really big, evil, strong bad guy if he's able to kick Worf's ass. But the problem is, they do it way too much that makes Worf actually look like a pansy. Which is something I never picked up on until other people pointed out. But after they did, I'm like, yeah. So that was just their mistake. The intention has always been to make Worf the biggest badass. And as far as what's his name, Nombrantane being Garrick Steady, agree, totally agree. I don't care. It doesn't hurt anything, but there was no point to it. And also glad Martok is back. And they make his character so much better. But anyway, next comment, and hopefully it's about this episode. Next comment is from Benjamin Mead, who says, as a standalone episode, I don't hate this. It's a pretty good episode. I enjoyed watching it, and I like the dynamic with Bashir's parents and dad in particular. But I also think going forward, the genetic enhancement storyline gets dumb and doesn't fit at all with what we've seen from Bashir so far. Does add an interesting element to the upcoming Section 31 stories, but other than that, I do not like it. I don't think it's even necessary for those Section 31 stories, and I mean, what do you mean it becomes dumb? It is dumb from the beginning. Now, I did forget to talk about Brian George, who's the actor who plays Bashir's father, and the actor talked about what a good experience working on this episode was, because usually he's just treated like an outsider and hired gun and not paid any attention to, but he says that his character was so rich that he was able to do more with it and actually do a lot of character development. He thought that the director and the other actors were really nice and treated him like he was a main actor, and so he appreciated it. So that's good to hear. I hear a lot of things about the behind the scenes of DS9 being a very tense and tough atmosphere to work in, but I think that's only for some people. Robert Picardo also said that he loved working with Alexandra Siddiq and Kal Meany, said that they were really friendly and nice, and it was a good atmosphere to work on, and they also said they liked working with him. They would have liked that they brought him back. But anyway, with Brian George, I of course know him for playing Christian Avasarala's husband in season 1 and 2 of The Expanse, which I thought he was really great there. And then he was unavailable in season 4 of The Expanse, so they recast him with an actor. I didn't hate the actor, but I hated the actor for that role. I think he was really miscast, and I really wanted Brian George back because he did such a great job. So he's a really good actor, but I think this is the only thing I've ever seen him in where he uses his actual British accent and not like a fake Indian accent. They always make him do these, or Pakistani, they always make him do these Middle Eastern accents. Like the biggest example is over on Seinfeld, where he played Babu. He was like, "You're a very, very bad person." So that was kind of like a stereotype, but whatever. But he's a good actor. So I get he's probably used to those bit parts where he's just playing a stereotype, so it's different for him to actually get a meaty role. But of course this will happen again later on with The Expanse as well. But this was the first time. Anyway, next comment is from Ricky, who says, "This episode is god awful. I never liked this episode and it makes me feel like an idiot. Look at the past 5 years and tell me that there were signs that Bashir was genetically enhanced. Hello, what about the quickening? He would have figured out the cure for everybody. Also in Rivals, he should have easily beaten O'Brien within the first 30 seconds. Hippocratic Oath, he would have found the solution to the Jem'Hadar. I mean, I can go on. This whole episode is bullshit, and this is the worst retcon in the history of television, and yes, I mean that. Way worse than the season 3 of Battlestar Galactica finale of Galen, Exo, Sol, and the other two being part of the final 5. And worse than the lost season 5 when Benjamin Lidus said that he made up the Invisible Man storyline in season 3. The only saving grace is the Rom and Leeta storyline, but not by much though, and Robert Picardo was wasted in this episode to me. I did like Bashir's father as Babu Butt from Seinfeld, but that's the only positive. So my rating is a 2 out of 10. Totally agree with you about Bashir. Doesn't fit at all. I am not like, okay, I'll grant you it's worse than the Battlestar Galactica retcon, but I'm not so sure about the Benjamin Lidus Lost retcon. Like, to me, I don't know, maybe it's not worse, but it angers me more for different reasons. But I don't know, I'm not clear if I would call this the worst retcon in television history. Definitely up there. It's definitely in the top 5, but I don't know, I would have to think about it before I made such a profound statement. Anyway, next comment is from Brandon Neal Howells, who says, "Louis Zimmerman is an earthhole. Richard Bashir is dodgy as fuck, and Rom is too shy to talk to women. I will give the woman playing Julian Bashir's mother 5 points because she acts well. I have never liked the whole Bashir's genetically enhanced story, and it was annoying to watch it again. Thanks for making me suffer, Mark. 4 copies of the Kama Sutra out of 10. Sorry, I don't force you to watch the episode. I just ask if you want to comment. It's up to you. But anyway, I know you mean it in good fun. But anyway, yeah, I agree. I like the actress who played Julian's mother. In fact, like, I think it was written very well. I also like Brian George, as I said, who played sounds like Ryan George from the pitch meetings, but it's Brian George. But anyway, yeah, I think they both do a really good job, and I like the use of them, like particularly in the scene where Bashir was confronting them and treating them like shit, and the mother spoke up and like, you don't know how difficult it was, and we did it because we loved you. Like, that was a powerful emotional scene. That's probably why I give this episode a higher rating than most of these patron comments do. You might be surprised of how high my rating is. I mean, it's not that high, but I'm not going to give it a 1 or anything like that. So yeah, don't dislike it quite as much as these comments do. Thank you, patrons, so much for your comments. So my rating for Dr. Bashir, I presume, out of 10 is going to be a 5 average. And I'll tell you what, if you retract that whole genetic engineering storyline or genetic engineer reveal, say that Bashir's secret is something more believable and something that doesn't completely retcon his character, then I would probably give this episode an 8, if I'm being perfectly honest. I thought it was a good character story for Bashir. It was very interesting to meet his parents. I think Robert Picardo actually works in this episode. I like his storyline with Leeta. They do overdo his sarcasm a bit, and they do have that dumbass sitcom scene where Bashir's parents talk to the hologram thinking it was him. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, I actually thought this was a good character story for Bashir. I thought it was a strong episode. It's just that fucking retcon ruins it. So I had to push it down to a 5. And I think even a 5 is generous. Maybe I was thinking about giving it a 4. But then I was like, yeah, I don't know. I thought it was good acting. And seeing Brian George as Bashir's father, I thought was good. And Robert Picardo, I think, was an interesting addition to the show. So I'll be very generous and give it a 5 out of 10. But as far as the retcon itself goes, that gets a 1 out of 10. That's the worst retcon in Star Trek. Maybe even the worst retcon in all of television. I'm not quite there yet, but maybe. So that is it for my review of Dr. Bashir, I presume. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to leave a like, subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you thought of the video. Yeah, of the episode. What do you think? Do you hate it as much as my Patreon supporters did? Or do you like it even better than I did? Maybe. If you really want to support the channel, you could do so by supporting me on Patreon. There's a link to that in the description below. You'll find different rewards for different tiers, such as you can request a video for me to do. I got pre-releases, and I have a series of patron-only videos that I release exclusively for my Patreon supporters where I revisit reviews that I've already done. And so you can check this out if you are so inclined to do so. Alright, so let's see what's coming up next on the old channel here. Monday will be my review of the Voyager episode Rise. Wednesday will be my review of the Voyager episode Favorite Son. Thursday will be reviewing the newest episode of Starfleet Academy, Season 1, Episode 4. And then next Saturday we'll be reviewing the DS9 episode A Simple Investigation. So that's what's coming up on my channel. Be sure to check me out as I continue to cover Star Trek Deep Space Nine and Star Trek Voyager and many other videos on Star Trek and other shows as well. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.